That crow on your fence post knows your face, not loosely, not as a figure of speech. By the end of this, you are going to understand exactly what that crow has recorded about you, and why June, specifically, is the month when crows compile everything they know about the humans who share their territory and pass it down. Something is happening in your garden every morning before you wake up. You've walked past it hundreds of times. It looks like nothing. It isn't. It is 5:43 in the morning. The street is yours, or one that looks exactly like yours. Flat light, cool air. The first birds have started somewhere behind the fence, but the traffic hasn't. And on the roofline across from your window, 3 crows are already awake and already working. Not foraging, not resting. Working. They have been doing this for 22 minutes. The question you should be asking, the question almost nobody asks, is what exactly they are working on. Crows live in families, not flocks, families, a mated pair at the center. The chicks from this year's brood, still dependent. And in most established urban territories, 1 or 2 or 3 adult offspring from previous years who came back, who gave up the chance to breed on their own and returned to help raise the next generation. These are called helper birds, and if that already sounds more complex than you expected from a crow, stay with it. The helpers matter for a specific reason. They expand the family's cognitive reach, more eyes on the territory, more minds holding the map, more individuals logging the faces, routines, and patterns of every human across their 40 acres. 40 acres. That is the approximate size of one crow family's territory in a suburban environment. Your street, the roads either side of it, the park at the end, the car park behind the shops 2 blocks over. All of it covered, all of it known, by one family of birds that has probably lived in that specific patch of land longer than you have. In one studied territory in a Seattle suburb, researchers tracked 11 individual birds, parents, helpers from 2 previous years, and the current season's fledglings, occupying the same 4 blocks across 3 consecutive breeding seasons. They had preferred perches, established patrol routes. A morning schedule that, the researchers noted, rarely varied by more than a few minutes. They called it a daily audit. And you are part of what gets audited. If you have never thought about crows this way before, subscribe. This channel covers wildlife behavior that happens right outside your window, every day, and goes entirely unnoticed. There is a lot more of it. When scientists at the University of Washington began studying how urban crows perceive the humans who live among them, they started with what seemed like a simple question. Do crows recognize individual human faces? To test it, researchers wore rubber masks during different kinds of fieldwork. One mask, a distinctive rugged face, was worn only by researchers who trapped and banded birds. A second, neutral mask was worn during entirely passive observation. Same clothing, same campus, different faces. Sometimes the same people, wearing different faces, doing different things. The crows that had been trapped while researchers wore the distinctive mask began alarm calling at it, scolding it, following it across the campus grounds. Some would mob it, diving at the face from above, calling as they went. Not the body, not the clothes. When the same mask was later worn by a completely different researcher, someone who had never set foot near a trap, crows on that part of campus still reacted. Years later, the memory hadn't faded, it had strengthened. But the finding that truly shifted what we thought we knew about crows wasn't the memory itself. It was what happened to the memory after those original birds died. Researchers tracked the alarm behavior across multiple breeding seasons. The birds that had actually experienced the trapping were gone. New birds, young birds, birds from subsequent clutches, birds who had never encountered a researcher, were still scolding the same face. The knowledge had been transmitted, not by genetics, not by instinct. One crow had watched another crow react, inferred what that reaction meant, and filed the association. The face had a history, and that history had become shared property. This is what it means to say a crow knows your face. It is not just that one crow has a memory of you. It is that your face, in a crow territory you have lived in long enough, may exist in a communal record that no single bird holds alone. A record that outlives the individuals who built it. A record that is right now being actively updated. Which is why June matters more than any other month in the crow calendar. June is when that communal record gets written into the next generation. Fledgling crows leave the nest in late May or early June. They are not independent. They cannot yet forage efficiently. They cannot fly with real confidence. They are conspicuously dependent, louder, clumsier, more visible than the adults, and they follow their parents everywhere, not just for food, for information. Watch a parent crow and a fledgling moving through a territory together, and what you are watching is something that looks, functionally, like an apprenticeship. The parent approaches a doorstep, a driveway, a garden path. It pauses, it looks, then it acts or it retreats. and the fledgling, one step behind, absorbs the decision. In studies where parent crows were observed during June alongside their young, researchers found that adult birds spent significantly more time at human interface zones, anywhere where human and crow territory overlap, than at equivalent food-rich areas where humans were absent. They were not optimizing for calories in June. They were optimizing for information. They were showing their children where the important edges were. Your front door is an important edge. Your morning routine is a data point. What time your lights come on, whether you move fast or slow, whether you have ever acknowledged the birds or ignored them entirely, whether you've made a sudden gesture that registered as threat. All of it is being demonstrated to a bird that will live for a decade or more and will carry this composite knowledge across every year of that life, and then pass it to its own fledglings. You are not just being observed by a crow, you are being archived. Stop and sit with this question. How many crows currently have a file on you? Not approximately, specifically. If you have lived at the same address for more than 2 years, and you live anywhere near green space, the answer is almost certainly more than you think. An established family covers 40 acres. The helper birds from last year, now studying their own territories nearby, took your face with them when they left. The fledglings watching your garden right now will still be watching it, or something near it, in 2038. You are already in multiple files. You just didn't know you were being logged. Here is something you can do tomorrow morning, tomorrow, not next week, that changes the nature of that relationship entirely. Go outside before 6 a.m., take peanuts in the shell. Crows show a consistent and well-documented preference for them. The intact shell signals to the crow that the food hasn't been overhandled, which in their risk logic translates to safer. Place 2 or 3 on a fence post or a low garden wall, somewhere with a clear sight line from above. Then step back 4 meters minimum and stand still. Look at the crow. Don't look away. In crow social cognition, direct eye contact is a signal of awareness. It tells the bird that you are a conscious actor in this space, not background noise. Most humans who pass through crow territory keep their heads down. They are invisible to themselves and, in a different sense, invisible to the crows too, filed as non-interactive, non-threatening and unimportant. A human who looks up, who holds the gaze, who demonstrably sees registers differently. Interesting. Worth a second assessment. When researchers tested this in suburban crow populations using color-ringed individually trackable birds, they found that crows receiving food from a consistent, aware human began modifying their morning routes. They spent more time near that house. They started arriving earlier. In several documented cases, individual birds were filmed arriving at the feeding location before the human appeared. Not because they were desperate for food, but because the pattern had become predictable, and in crow territory, a predictable and safe human is a resource worth tracking. 3 consecutive mornings. That is all it takes to shift from anonymous to known. You are not just feeding a bird. You are introducing yourself to a family that already knows your street better than you do, and offering them a reason to decide that you are worth knowing in return. If you're going to try the dawn introduction this week, drop a comment with the word filing, and if you come back to report what happened, this community genuinely wants to know. Real observations from real gardens tell us things that controlled studies can't reach. But June is not only when crows add new entries to their existing knowledge. June is when that knowledge multiplies. The fledglings following their parents this morning will live, in most cases, between 7 and 12 years in the wild. The oldest formally recorded wild crow in North America survived 29 years. Every adult in that fledgling's family, parents, helpers, older siblings, is teaching it something slightly different, because each has a slightly different range, different encounters, different human files. The fledgling is synthesizing all of it simultaneously. By the time that bird reaches adulthood and begins its own morning audits, it will carry a layered composite knowledge built from multiple individual histories. Your face, log this June, may be part of that composite for the next 2 decades, across different occupants of your house, across changes to your street that haven't happened yet, in the memory of a bird that watched your garden before any of your current neighbors moved in. Crow families in established urban territories show something researchers call site fidelity, the same nest sites, the same patrol routes, the same morning rhythms, documented across observed periods of 15 years and more. The territory doesn't reset when individual birds die, it persists. You are living on a street that a crow family has probably known longer than any human who lives there. To understand how all of this is actually possible, the memory, the transmission, the territorial cognition, you have to sit with one fact about the crow brain. Crows have a brain-to-body ratio comparable to some great apes. The region of their brain that handles forward planning, social cognition and episodic memory is, proportionally, larger than that of most other birds. When researchers measure corvid performance on theory of mind tasks, tasks that assess whether an animal understands that another individual has a separate point of view, crows consistently match or outperform animals we reflexively regard as intelligent. In one test, a crow watched another crow cache food. That watching crow was then given its own food to cache. If it understood that it had been observed, it would move its own cache before the other bird could steal it. It moved the cache. The crow understood that the other crow had seen what it saw. It modeled another individual's knowledge. It anticipated future behavior based on that model, and it acted preemptively. That is, the cognitive architecture operating when you stand at your window at 7:15 every morning, with your coffee, while a crow sits on your fence. It is not simply registering your presence, it is actively modeling your routine, making predictions, noting the gap between what it expected and what actually happened, updating the file. It is doing, in its own way, exactly what you are doing right now, trying to understand what the thing on the other side of the glass is actually thinking. There is a specific behavior that happens during these June morning patrols that most people have watched and completely misread. You have probably seen it. Crows regularly pick objects from zones of high human activity, doorsteps, driveways, garden paths, window ledges. They examine them, then they replace them. And in territory monitoring studies, researchers observed individual crows returning to the same non-food objects on consecutive mornings. A stone, a cable tie, a bent piece of wire, picked up, examined and set back down, again the next morning, and the morning after. The initial assumption was food testing. Crows are omnivores. Investigating objects for edibility is entirely logical. But the objects they returned to repeatedly had no nutritional value, and the behavior was too systematic to be incidental. The working hypothesis, developed across multiple observation sites, is that crows may use known physical objects as environmental markers, reference points that tell them whether their territory has been disturbed, whether something has shifted, whether further investigation is warranted. When an object moves that shouldn't have moved, the crow registers the anomaly. When a new object appears in a mapped space, the crow investigates. Your front path is not a neutral surface to the crow family that covers your street. It is a monitored space, and anything that changes on it, anything at all, gets noted. If this video is landing differently than you expected a video about crows to land, share it. The algorithm does not surface this kind of content to people who would want it. You are the only way it finds them. There is one more documented behavior between established crow families and the specific humans they have come to consistently recognize, and it is the one that most people find the hardest to fit into a simple framework. In observations stretching across multiple urban study sites and documented cases going back decades, wild crows have occasionally left objects near the homes of humans who fed them regularly. Small objects, bright ones often, a smooth white pebble, a bottle cap, a piece of sea glass, a single screw. Not trained crows, not study animals in any controlled setting. Wild crows in their own territories, with full freedom of movement, returning to a spot near a specific human's door and leaving something there. Researchers are careful about overinterpreting this. The behavior may be incidental, it may be displacement. The science does not yet support strong mechanistic conclusions, but the behavior is real, documented consistently. Across different countries, different corvid species, different study populations over multiple decades. A wild animal, in its territory, leaving something at your door, and here is the detail worth holding. The crow that left it knew your schedule. It knew your face. It knew that object was not there before it placed it. It left it somewhere you would find it on your way out. Whatever the mechanism, that is not an accident, that is a choice. And you can decide what you want to make of a wild animal that chooses to leave you something. Come back to where we started. That crow on your fence post, still, watching. You thought it was just there. Resting maybe. Passing through. It has logged that you came out 4 minutes later than yesterday. It has checked the stone near your gate and found it unchanged. It has decided for the 100th morning in a row that you are not a threat. And right now, somewhere behind it in your garden, there is a fledgling making that exact same assessment for the very first time. Everything that crow knows about you, every entry in the file built across however many mornings you've shared this street, is being transferred. Not when the parent dies. This morning. That knowledge does not end with the bird. It continues through the territory, through the family, through the years. Held in the minds of animals that will still be auditing your street, long after you have forgotten the crow was ever there. Tomorrow morning, go outside before the street wakes up. Stand somewhere visible, stand still, and ask yourself not what the crow is doing, but what the crow knows about you. If you have ever had a crow react to you differently than it reacted to others, follow you, show up at your window, bring you something, leave it in the comments below. That observation belongs in this conversation. Researchers read these accounts. Other people recognize their own experience in them. Your garden is not an isolated data point. Subscribe if you haven't already. There is more like this, a lot more, and almost none of it gets the attention it deserves. The crow had a file on you. It just never let you read it until now.